Okay, so today we are going to talk about something funny for a change. I was about to say, of course, all of these Dufu poems are funny in their own little special way. But today we're going to talk about something that is extraordinarily funny, namely famous alcoholics. And who doesn't love famous alcoholics? So this poem is called the Song of Eight Drinking Immortals, 饮中八仙歌. So this is a song of the eight immortals of drinking. 饮中八仙. Yes, what can you say? So apparently being a great drunk in the Tang Dynasty was a big deal. It was something that made you famous. And this is a semi-longish poem. It's about, let's see here, about 10, 20 something poems, 20 something lines. And it's a little sort of vignette of various people that made a name for themselves by being really awesome to be around when they were drunk. And then Dufa had the grace to make a poem about them so that we remember all these people. And it seems like this Yin Zhong Ba Xian, these eight drinking immortals, that they were not actually people that got together as a group and drank, but they are sort of put together from perhaps a sort of popular point of view, you might say. It's like people make a list in the media, and the 8 best drunks of this century, something like that, and they said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and here are the names on the list. Because the people mentioned in this poem, they didn't actually live in exactly the same time. Some had actually died, or at least one of them had, what I can understand, one of them had died when Dufu was around, and the other ones were sort of, don't seem necessarily to belong to the same gang. So it's not a realistic poem. This it's not an occasional verse like a lot of the poems that we're going through here, and because of this, it's also very difficult to say exactly when it was composed, but it seems rather carefree and relaxed, and as such, it is most probably from the period when Dufu lived in Luoyang, or when he stayed in Luoyang in the beginning of his career before the rebellion broke out and all hell broke loose. And it says, Gu Song of Eight Drinking Immortals. So as you've seen, it's a sort of long form, as I said, or half long form, and because it's a song form, it is actually irregular. You know, I like to put all of this down just like this in this opening screens, because this is it reflects a little bit what these poems would have looked like to a contemporary reader. There were no punctuation and nothing really to aid the eye in parsing the poem, but here we have a quite irregular format actually. So it's constructed in chunks of like 2, 3, and 4 lines, but they're all 7 characters each, and they have the same rhyme going through them all. So it's tied together in that way, and it's quite relatively colloquial and not too difficult language-wise at all, I would say. So let's start and go through, and he just opens without further ado and just starts rattling off these names. So here we have it: 支张骑马似乘船，眼花落尽水里也. So this He Zhang, yes, the translator, he supplies us with the family name of this Zhi Zhang guy. He Zhang was a guy who had an important and long political career in various positions under the reign of Xuanzong, and he was a poet, and he seems to have been a Taoist as well, and he was a drinking buddy of Li Bai. It's said that he was actually the person who was responsible for the appellation 谪仙, which is you can translate it as the banished immortal. It was this idea that Li Bai's talent was of the sort that it cannot have been merely mortal or earthly. So he must have been an immortal being that was banished from heaven or happier realms, whatever they were imagined to be in the ancient Chinese tradition. So this is Zhi Zhang. And he rides his horse as if sailing on a boat, yeah, and spots in his vision, Hua, blurry-eyed. He falls in a well and slumbers underwater. Quite interesting. I realized I just made a mistake reading this. 智障骑马似乘船，烟花落进水底眠. Of course, not 眼. What am I thinking of? 水底眠. He slumbers underwater. And then we just immediately cross over to the next drinking immortal, who is 汝阳。汝阳三斗是朝天，道逢居车口流涎，恨不移风向酒泉。酒泉. So here we have Ru Yang. Who is Ru Yang then? Ru Yang is actually Prince Ru Yang. So his title was Ru Yang Wang, King Ru Yang even. Prince Ru Yang. His name was Li Jing and he was a nephew of Xuanzong. And this was also a drinking buddy of He Zhizhang and the other guys. And this was an acquaintance of Du Fu. And we know that because Du Fu had been present at his house and he wrote a poem for him, which is also in Du Fu's extant catalogue, which is quite nice. And here he says, Ru Yang will go to Dawn Court only after having 3 quarts. I dispute this translation. My interpretation is much funnier. So Sandou, yes, 3 quarts. If I understand this correctly, 1 quart refers to a quarter gallon, which is something like a litre. 2 pints, I suppose. A pint I'm familiar with, being a European. So 3 quarts anyway. Sandou, it's supposed to be a sizable amount of liquor or beer or whatever things they like to imbibe back in the days. And he says 是朝天. Yeah, so Stephen Owen interprets this as going to Dawn Court. Yeah, 朝天, Tian then being the emperor. But isn't it I think it means just he drinks a lot of stuff, and only after he has drunk a lot of whatever they drink, he lies on his ground and faces heaven. You know, he doesn't reel over until he's had 3 quarts or 3 dou, however much that might have been. And then meeting a mash cart on the road, his mouth drools. 道逢驱车. So this 驱, this is the character that's being translated as mash, and in simplified Chinese, this is written with the same character as 委屈 the 屈 and 一曲歌 this character, as if that didn't have enough significations already. 曲 mash, yes, it's what you make liquor from. It's basically this raw material that's put there and it sort of ferments and makes alcohol. So he is joking that of course, if he meets a cart full of this and having the smell on the road, his mouth drools. And his biggest problem in life is that he cannot change his thief to ale spring. So Jiu Quan is actually a real place. It's not mythological or anything. There's actually a real place called Jiu Quan, and it is in modern Gansu. So obviously, if you're a real drunk and you're a prince means that you're entitled to a fief. That is an area which basically belongs to you, where you can do whatever you want, and you have the rights of taxation and whatever. And of course, that didn't apply at all in Tang Dynasty, the Tang Dynasty context, as far as I'm aware. This was something ceremonial, basically, as we do I'm Swedish, as you might know, and in Sweden the princess of Sweden is called the Duchess of Värmland or something like that, which just means nothing. And I believe it was something similar here, that if a nephew of Xuanzong had some kind of fief. It was a ceremonial position. It was just merely honorary. And in that case, why shouldn't this famous drunk have his fief in ale spring 酒泉? Obviously, that makes a whole lot more sense than wherever he actually did have his fief, probably in Ruyang, right? He should be 酒泉王, not Ruyang Wang. Okay. 左相日兴费万钱，饮着长鲸西百川。衔杯乐圣称避嫌. Well, this is slightly weird, at least the last line. 左相 it refers to actually a guy called Li Shizhi. And yeah, we can't see that it is that from the poem, but I know it from the various comments that I've consulted about this, and I think it also says in a note in Stephen Owen's eminent translation. And Li Shizhi, I'm not sure actually that he is related to Xuanzong. Perhaps he is. A lot of probably most of these Lis that had power were related in some way or another to the imperial clan, which of course had the surname Li. And here it says, 日兴 gets up every day, yes, get up every day, and spends 1,000 cash, presumably on alcohol then, but hopefully not only for himself. I'm not sure how much alcohol or drinking material you could get from 10,000 cash back in the days, but I guess it was more than one person could drink. Even though you drank like a long behemoth, like a long whale, actually is what it says. You're drinking like a long whale sucking up 100 rivers. Well, maybe that would actually cost you 10,000 cash, who knows. The one line that is a little bit strange here is the last one. And specifically this sheng and the xian. The cup to his lips, xian bei, holding the cup, it actually means. He enjoys the sage, le sheng, and he claims that he avoids the worthy. Yeah, okay, so these two are said to be clear and thick ale, respectively, by Owen. That's something I get from his comment, his annotation. In my edition, there's a comment to the effect that Li Shizhi, this minister of the left, was actually forced from his post as minister by the villain of the era, the great villain of the era, Li Linfu, in 746, and that he then wrote a poem which contained the line 避嫌出罢相. So, when in avoidance of the worthy, I first resigned the post of minister. 避嫌出罢相. This line of poetry was perhaps ironically referring to Li Linfu. And in that case, if that is the explanation, then that is the poem that is being quoted by Du Fu here. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's in any way, it's hard for us to understand nowadays what is le sheng and le bi xian. But in any case, the problem, of course, with the latter interpretation that this refers to a line in his own poem. Well, it can still do, but it still needs an explanation for this sheng. So sheng and xian were probably, just as Owen says, sort of humorous terms for various types of alcohol. Yes. Then we go on. 宗之潇洒美少年，举觞白眼望青天，皎如玉树临风前. So this 宗之, again, Owen supplies the family name, 崔宗之. This was also a friend of Li Bai, apparently. And 潇洒美少年, carefree, handsome young man, yeah, it doesn't require any comment at all. 举觞白眼望青天, showing the whites of his eyes and gazing at blue heaven. Yeah, he uses the whites of his eyes to look at blue heaven. And this white of the eyes, this is a super common sort of locution that refers to I mean, if you don't look straight at someone, you look at them with the corner of your eye. It seems you show your eye whites to them. That's obviously something you do to people that you don't like or respect. And there's always, whenever this occurs in a commented edition, it refers back to the first usage of it, which was by Ran Ji, and that he looked at people he didn't respect with his eye white. But it's very fairly general. You can understand it intuitively, looking at someone with the white of the eye. Because I'm just not bringing you into consideration at all. You're unimportant to me. And this Cui Zongzhi, he uses that kind of attitude to look at the blue heaven. So he's disrespectful even to the blue heaven. You can imagine what kind of interesting talks you would have to him when he was drunk, wouldn't you? And gleaming like a tree of jade standing in it, when he must have been a smashing young man, mustn't he have been? I mean, 皎如玉树, gleaming like a tree of jade. A tree of jade is certainly something that refers to his beautiful, striking appearance. And we go ahead. 苏尽常斋修佛前，最终往往爱逃禅. This is a cute couplet. I really like this one. And Su Jing is actually a person who was surely dead at the time of Du Fu writing this poem, which sort of proves, if nothing else does, that this Ba Xian appellation, the 8 Immortals of drinking, is not something that Du Fu invented. It's something he probably picked up somewhere else, and probably something that was common parlance in this sort of big city life at the time. And Su Jing was a kind of right-hand man to Xuanzong in the early part of his reign, so also an important political figure. And this whole couplet refers to his Buddhist beliefs, obviously. Long abstention, Chang Zhai, this is the various types of abstention required by believing Buddhists or practicing Buddhists before an embroidered Buddha. Yeah? And when he's drunk, he always likes to escape Chan restrictions. 最终往往爱逃禅. Tao Chan is what's translated here obviously as escape Chan restrictions. Chan being the Chinese pronunciation of the word that we know in the West as Zen. So Chan and Zen are the same thing, and it refers to meditation. Basically, it refers to being in deep meditation. It's a phonetic translation of the Sanskrit word dhyana, which refers basically to deep meditation. And the Tao Chan admits of 2 readings. One here is the one that's chosen by our dear translator here, that Tao Chan means to escape Chan, so escape Buddhist restrictions. The other one I think is even more funny. You could say that he's not escaping out of Zen, he's escaping into Zen, which is surely possible. Wouldn't it be? Escaping into a kind of enlightened state, or into a state where worldly matters, such as those he always had to deal with on a daily basis, don't matter to him anymore. At least that's how I feel about it. So let's go on. Now we have 4 lines dedicated to Li Bai, obviously the big superstar among the 8 Immortals of drinking. 李白一斗诗百篇，长安市上酒家眠。天子呼来不上船，自称臣是酒中仙。And Li Bai, of course, his drunken behavior was, of course, legendary. And it seems that most of the stories that we have of Li Bai relate in some way to drinking. And honestly, a lot of the time it sounds like he's a downright alcoholic, and we have it here as well, like sleeping in the taverns, 长安市上酒家眠, sleeping in the tavern in the marketplace. I'm like, who does that? What respectable man does that? Not any respectable man at all, and that was the kind of man that Li Bai was. And there's a really famous story, of course, when he was summoned by the emperor and he just fell asleep somewhere in a tavern, and the emperor's people found him there and just dragged him away from that tavern and just woke him up in front of the emperor by pouring water on his face. And Li Bai just woke up and just got his bearings and realized he was in the presence of the emperor of China and the son of heaven, and he immediately produced 10 incredible poems just spontaneously. And this is the type of stuff that he did. And but later he was also, of course, shown extraordinary favors by Xuanzong, and he became a popular person at court. And Xuanzong wanted to have him with him at various times. And I think this 天子呼来不上船 refers to one of these sort of episodes. He wouldn't get on the boat when the emperor called him and so on and so forth. He could do what he pleased, basically, because the emperor loved him. And don't think language-wise, of course, this is so obvious. There's nothing to comment on here. 自称陈氏酒中仙. Yeah, perhaps this 酒仙饮中八仙, perhaps this appellation is actually something that Li Bai invented. Who knows? It started with him, and then it was sort of broadened to include a greater group of people. And among those people are 张旭三杯草盛传，脱帽鹿鼎王宫前，挥毫落纸如云烟. Wonderful, isn't it? 张旭, if you don't know, is still actually one of the real famous calligraphers of the Tang era, 张旭. And we possess some of his original works still. And 草盛, 草 is, of course, grass-style calligraphy. Oh, sorry. Grass style, that's what's referred to here as the draft script. Yeah, it's basically the most unreadable type of Chinese calligraphy. And Zhang Xu was a totally avant-garde guy. I mean, he did wildly weird stuff with his calligraphy. He wrote calligraphy with his hair, and he obviously was a great drunkard. So he only needed 3 cups. He didn't need 3 quarts or santo. He only needed 3 little cups, and the words of his draft script sagehood was bruited all around. He used a very obscure English word, which is favored here by our translator. Well, why not? And apparently this Sheng, calling him the sage of calligraphy, or the sage of grass calligraphy, this cursive style calligraphy, was applied to him already when Du Fu wrote. That's nothing that was invented by Du Fu. And he took off his hat and bared his head in front of princes and dukes, which was probably, I imagine, quite improper thing to do. But then he used his brush, and drops fell on the paper like a mist of clouds and smoke. I'm not sure exactly why Owen translates paper drops. Paper drops sounds extremely odd. I don't think anyone writes calligraphy with paper. You write on paper. So when he wields his brush and waves it around, something falls on the paper, yes. He's writing, or drops of ink or something else, but not paper drops. Can we agree on that at least? I'm not sure. Sorry, I don't want to. I shouldn't get bogged down in this comparing the translation, but it might confuse some people if you don't correct some mistakes. And okay, let's go to the last couplet. So that's Zhang Xu. We have 7 of the Immortals under our belt now, and we go to the 8th one. 焦穗五斗方卓然，高谈雄辩经四言. And there's not that much to say about Jiao Sui, actually. Jiao Sui. We don't really know who this is. We know that he was one of the 8 Immortals of the Wine Cup. But, I mean, he sounds like a pretty great guy. Obviously, his grand discussions and bold arguments. 高谈雄辩, shock everyone at the feast. 经四言. I mean, drinking and talking, honestly, is one of my favorite occupations in life. And so someone who can like drink and talk as well as this, he's my man. And well, is there anything really difficult about this couplet language-wise? 卓然 perhaps, outstanding. Yeah, outstanding is a really good translation actually, because this is 卓 basically means standing high. So standing high, being eminent, being outstanding, drawing the views of every eye in the company to him. Yeah, it's a perfectly good translation. 高谈雄辩金丝眼. Yeah, that's it, folks. 22 lines, 8 drunk people, famous Tang Dynasty drunks. But what's not to love, right? So thank you for listening, everyone, and see you next time.